Okay, so Ron, thank you for agreeing to do this video for BioNews Services.
Thank you, Larry.
This is for our Frederick's Ataxia site. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your presentation today and about the importance of this conference and what you hope to accomplish.
Okay. Easily done. I'm really excited about this conference and the things that are going on in the Friedreich's ataxia community. At this conference, my presentation centered on the things that you and I have talked about before, the tremendous importance of patient advocacy groups and patient groups like FARA, working with our industry partners and our government partners, and other patient advocacy groups. So we always say we're all in, all together, all the time. And it has to be that way because we knew from the very beginning there was absolutely no way we could accomplish anything by ourselves. It was going to take a village, as it's sometimes called. So we started working with anybody and everybody in the world we could identify with any interest in our disease. And eventually that led to industry partners coming to our side because we were building for them the assets they needed to advance research in Friedreich's ataxia and come up with a product. And those are assets such as the education and motivation of our patient community, the trusting relationship we built with that community, the patient registry, the natural history data, the clinical network that we support around the world, the translational tools like animal and cell models, biomarkers, development of, and we actually help these companies design their clinical trials and pick the right endpoints, pick the right procedures, pick the right patients that are best suited to their therapeutic approach. And then those trials are conducted at the clinical sites in our network. So, and we recruit those clinical trials in a heartbeat. I mean, we've recruited phase 3 clinical trials of 70 patients at sites across the United States in a couple of hours. And that's just remarkably important because so many trials fail, and the largest majority of those that fail because of lack of recruitment.
You can't find enough patients.
Can't find enough patients, and we find the patients in a couple of hours, which saves a lot of time and money. And it also means that the trials will be conducted on time, and that we recruit not only quickly but efficiently because we know enough from our patient registry about what condition each patient is in. Therefore, which of those patients are most eligible for each of these trials based on the inclusion-exclusion criteria that we get from the company.
How long have you maintained the registry?
From the very beginning, we started the contact registry, the demographic registry. We started on an Excel
What
spreadsheet.
address, email address?
Exactly, phone number, and do they have genetic confirmation? We needed to make sure that they had Friedreich's ataxia. And that's easy to do in Friedreich's because you have a genetic confirmation available since 1996.
And how many people are on your registry now?
A little over 3,000 on the registry, so it's the largest patient registry in the world. And now
I'm sorry, it's the largest patient registry for FA?
For FA in the world.
Okay.
And the really neat thing about that too is we have recently worked with our advocacy partners around the world to make this totally and fully a global registry. So yes, there are more U.S. patients than from any other country, but then there are patients from all over the world also registered, as many of them as we can identify and they get in touch with us.
Great. Out of the 3,000, how many are U.S.?
About 1,500.
All right, so about half are U.S.
About roughly that. I should know that, but I've lost the data point. Believe it or not, the next country is Brazil. There are like 500 Brazilian patients in it. A lot of patients in Australia, a lot of patients throughout Europe, patients in Canada, basically patients throughout the Americas.
Is there any specific ethnicity that the FA tends to strike, or is everybody equally?
Well, very good question. I'll start with the negative of that. The ethnicities that are not stricken by FA are Far East Asians and Black Africans.
Okay.
So
Africans as well, right?
well, Black Africans.
Okay, but what about in the U.S.?
Oh, there are no Black American, no African Americans with our disease, as far as we know,
Nor Africans in Africa.
or Africa or
Okay,
Black
so,
Africans.
So what you're saying is Black people don't get FA generally.
Nor do Asians. There are no Chinese, Japanese. However, South Asians, like India, Afghanistan, Pakistan,
Right.
throughout the Middle East. So basically, it's everywhere the Roman Empire was and where its successor empires went. So it's throughout the Americas, throughout Europe, East, Central, and West, throughout the Middle East, throughout South Asia, India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Australia.
I understand.
And Canada, throughout the Americas. So the other important aspect of that, I mentioned the importance of the patient registry that allows us to recruit these clinical trials so quickly and efficiently. We also have the world's largest natural history database that sometimes is referred to as a registry. That's always a confusing point. But we keep both of those structures separate, and we've now got about 1,300 FA patients in our natural history database across anywhere from 1 to 15 years. So some of those patients have been in that natural history database for 15 years with annual examinations, so we can see the natural progression of Friedreich's ataxia without intervention.
At what age does FA generally strike?
We usually say it's children and adults. So we usually say diagnosis occurs generally between the ages of 5 and 15. There is a later onset Friedreich's ataxia where patients are diagnosed in their 20s, some of them even later, but those are milder mutations. But we have a lot of patients diagnosed from 5 to 15.
What's the average life expectancy of an FA patient?
We generally say that that's early adulthood. We used to say that the average life expectancy was, about 37. Well, there's so little compelling data.
37 is interesting because that was the average life expectancy for cystic fibrosis until it was just now revised up to 44.
Yeah, well, before that, the average life expectancy was in the teens for cystic fibrosis. In fact, initially it was age 4. So that's and so now the wonderful research that's gone on in cystic fibrosis has expanded. I'll say that my nephew was the director of the first adult cystic fibrosis clinic. And that was a wonderful statement about the tremendous progress being made in that
Very
disease.
interesting. Can you just, I know I've heard the story before, but for our people who are watching, could you explain how you got into this, please?
Until 1996, I wouldn't have been able to spell Friedreich's ataxia, and that actually until 1997, because in 1997, our son Keith, then 11, was diagnosed with FA, and so we mad scrambled onto our computers and tried to figure out what in the world this disease was. We got some very bad news. We realized it was a rare genetic disorder that would be progressive, that it would be that our son was going to get very sick very fast. We realized he would lose some vision, hearing, and speech. He developed severe scoliosis, requiring surgery to get his spine straight and keep it there. We knew he would lose strength and coordination in all 4 limbs and probably be in a wheelchair by his mid-teens, have a much increased risk of diabetes, and the most condemning symptom would be congestive heart failure that accrues to this disease. All that happened to our son. He got all those symptoms and was diagnosed at 11 and died at 24 with congestive heart failure. But when he was diagnosed at 11, we scrambled to learn as much as we could. We committed ourselves to establishing a foundation that could raise funds and awareness. And we thought that because the gene had been identified only the year earlier, almost to the day, March of 1996, it was announced that the FA gene is on the 9th chromosome at this location, and the mutation is in the first intron, and it's a triplet expansion mutation. With that kind of knowledge, we said, if we can raise enough money and awareness and help support the research, we could maybe make a difference.
Have you had any scientific background?
None. You know, I was in military political affairs and had a graduate degree in Russian area studies, but I had the good fortune of my wife and I living here in the Washington, D.C. area. We worked together on Capitol Hill I for a congressional committee, she for a Louisiana congressman, who happened to represent, you asked about incidents geographically. This Congressman Billy Tozan of the 3rd District of Louisiana happened to be the one that represented the population. He was sometimes called the Cajun congressman. You know, so the Acadians that came first from France, then to Nova Scotia, and then back to France, and down the east coast of the United States, and then the French came back to North America and landed in Louisiana and populated the Golden Triangle between Texas and Louisiana, where the incidence of Friedreich's ataxia is about 2.5 times that of the national average.
The incidence of FA in Louisiana?
Is in the Acadian population, the Cajun population of Louisiana, is about 2.5 times that of the general U.S. population.
Are there any other areas of the United States where you
hot
see this?
spots? No.
Only Louisiana? That's it.
Well, that's where the Cajuns went.
Right.
So the Acadians came out of Nova Scotia.
Right.
There's
Do you think
probably
there's a genetic reason for this?
Yes. It's clear that there were a couple of what would be called founders.
Founders, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
right.
we got the same thing, for example, with the Amish in SMA.
Exactly right. It's the same. It's the same situation.
I was in a clinic in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania,
Right.
and was very surprised to learn that the prevalence among certain Amish and Mennonite groups in Canada was 1 in 239, compared to 1 in 15,000.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And the way that's played out in South Louisiana, where the Cajuns live, is among that population. You know, in general population, maybe 1 in 90 are carriers.
1 in 90
in the general Caucasian population, 1 in 90 or so. To make the math easier, you usually say 1 in 100. But the Acadian population, probably more than 1 in 50. Wow. You know, so probably 1 in 40 in the Acadian population. So you just do the math. And
how does that translate into prevalence of the disease? Let's say actual, not carriers, but people with the disease.
Let's do it the easy way. If 1 in 100 are carriers, the chances of getting 2 carriers to marry and have children, 1 in 10,000.
Right.
Then it's a recessive trait, so 1 in 4 is going to. The odds are 1 in 4 of each childbirth, live birth of that union, would have Friedreich's ataxia. So you know 4 times 10,000 is 40,000, so it's 1 in 40,000.
Well, that's still a very rare disease.
It's a very rare disease, yeah. So our rough estimate is statistically maybe 5,000 American patients, maybe 15 to 20,000 worldwide. Again, because it's only in the Caucasian population. So.
And yet, in your registry, you have about 3,000.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's getting up there.
Let's talk about FARA, if we could. How big is FARA? What's your budget? How many people are working there? And what are your?
Well, we started we established the foundation in 1998, a year after our son was diagnosed, and we established it with a board of directors that were 11 people. 3 were scientists that were leading investigators in the world in this disorder. 7 of the other 8 were parents like ourselves. 1 was an adult patient. We were all volunteers. We had no employees, and that was the case from 1998 until 2006. We were just a working board of volunteers. We did everything ourselves. We paid for our newsletter. We paid for our own travel. In 2006, I was asked to step down from my day job. I was
What were you doing?
I had about 5 careers, but the one at that time was I was president of a consulting firm that had clients that needed help in Washington, working on matters of security and energy, especially those that wanted to work with the former Soviet Union, in which I'd been very much involved.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
In 2006, I told, the board said we'd really appreciate it if you could quit your day job and work full time as the FARA president, and we'll give you a sufficient salary to support your family.
Today, how big is FARA's budget?
And now, and that I'll answer it in the negative again. That first year, which would have been 1998 till same point in 1999, we raised about $100,000, and half of that came from an NIH grant to do the world's first scientific conference on FA.
So you raised $100,000 in the first year, half of which came from NIH?
NIH to support a workshop. It was the first scientific conference in FA in the world. We got 80 scientists together that were working on Friedreich's ataxia, and that grant from the NIH helped support that. If you and then we doubled that budget the next year and doubled that budget the next year until we are now raising close to $8 million a year, and about 93% of that is devoted to the operations of scientific research around the world. And we've grown from 0 employees now to 9 full-time employees, and 2 of them are scientists that work as our medical officers and scientific officers.
So let's talk a bit about the news here today, and maybe not only gene therapy, but other therapies that might work.
Great question, Larry. We are just excited beyond belief about this year, because it's in this year that these, what are sometimes called regenerative medicines, are coming to our doorstep, and that include enzyme replacement or protein replacement or supplementation therapies, and gene therapy. We are expecting that this year in Friedreich's ataxia we'll have at least 2, if not 3, clinical trials commencing in those kinds of regenerative medicines. We believe our first one will be in protein replacement. From our previous conversations that FA is caused by very low levels of the frataxin protein in our patients. They're getting only about 10% of a normal load of frataxin protein. Regenerative medicine for us would be find a way to get them more frataxin protein.
Right.
And we will start clinical trials this year. They'll be the first ones. We went to the FDA this week with our first, as I told them emotionally at the table, I'm emotional because this is the first time we've been able to bring to you a potential therapy that would address the underlying cause of our disease, these low levels of frataxin proteins. This therapy is aimed at doing just that by injecting frataxin protein with a bus, with a vehicle, a TAT peptide that would take that protein to where it does its work in the mitochondria.
So it's injecting frataxin protein.
I'm sorry?
Injecting frataxin protein.
Protein with the vehicle that takes it to the right place, the mitochondria of all of our cells. So that therapy should be in clinic this year, along with our first gene therapy trials should begin this year. So this conference is so exciting for us because the bulk of these discussions are about these regenerative therapies, and we've got all the stakeholders here. There are companies, there's the FDA, the NIH, patient advocates,
right.
So we're all here together.
Can we not identify the companies that are underway in trial already?
I'd rather. We have no companies that already are in clinical trials for gene therapy or protein replacement. I'd rather not get into the names of those that we hope to be, because we don't know which one's going to cross the starting line first.
Okay,
so yeah.
Just in general, the cost of a gene therapy versus the enzyme replacement.
Oh, that's.
How does that balance out? In the long run, what's more efficient, really? What's more cost effective?
Well, I'll answer the second part of that first and say that I wouldn't even look at it in terms of which would be most effective. I would say we're probably going to need them all, because no single therapy. We don't believe there'll be a single therapy that will be one and done. That all of our patients would respond to a single therapy to a curative level. So our anticipation is that it's going to be a combined therapy or a cocktail therapy approach, in which we might have a gene therapy compound, we might have a protein replacement. There's no reason to believe they would be counterindicative, that you couldn't use them both. And we might even have a mitochondrial agent, like an antioxidant. It's going to be belts and suspenders.
Right.
So.
Okay. And then I just wanted to ask a little bit about the life of a patient with FA, mm-hmm. the quality of life issue, because as you said, ambulation declines, they're in the wheelchair by the teens, congestive heart failure, etc. So what is your organization doing actually to improve the quality of life for patients?
Well, our approach to improving the quality of life is to get effective therapy, and already we've been able to provide our patients and their families and their clinicians a clinical care guideline package that took us several years to develop. The best clinical minds from around the world that know our disease, combined in taking tissue by tissue. Here are the things you can do, to help pain. Here are the things you can do to help your heart, so forth. So there are sort of symptomatic approaches to improving, your abilities on a daily basis. None of them are approved therapies. They're just, in some case, physical therapy or occupational therapy, but also antioxidation from green leafy vegetables and blueberries and darkly pigmented.
So
nutritional considerations, exercise, to try to keep your upper body strong so you can transfer once you go into a wheelchair and so forth. But our real approach to quality of life and activities of daily living is we put all of our energy into developing these therapies, and now we've got like 9 clinical trials and a full treatment pipeline still in preclinical phases. So we haven't gotten our first approved treatment yet, but we plan and hope, and I expect that one to come soon. Great. And we'll use that as the building block. Was it on your website that I read about a kid who was riding a bicycle across the country? Yes, that's we call him Ambassador Kyle Bryant, and he is on the FARA staff now. We met him years ago when he was still ambulatory, but with difficulty. He was beginning to, have difficulty walking. He decided to get himself. He'd been a good athlete, but then he started having trouble. Right. He decided to get himself a recumbent trike, and he said, "I'm going to start riding and getting around that way." He did that for a couple of months. He said, wow, this is really cool. I feel totally empowered. He started going to his recumbent bike. He started going into longer and longer rides. He decided he was going to ride his bike with his dad from San Diego, California, to Memphis, Tennessee, to the meeting of the National Ataxia Foundation, one of our advocacy group partners. And he said to me, he asked me to come to the launch in La Jolla, California, and he said, well, I won't get into all that. So
we'd like to follow up on that.
Okay,
That's a good
all right.
story for us.
Okay, and so he did that ride. He raised on that, and he stopped in various cities and met with our scientists, met with our patient families, raised some money. He raised $42,000.
Okay.
We suggested to him that a great way to get the National Ataxia Foundation and FARA working even more collaboratively together is we split those proceeds, send them a check for $21,000. We'll keep a check for $21,000, and we'll have both organizations agree to match that donation and do a grant together, and we'd call it the Kyle Bryant Translational Research Award in Friedreich's ataxia. That was such a successful effort that we ended up co-funding 4 such grants with the National Ataxia Foundation because all the applications were so good. We said, we can't just stop with 1, let's go to 4, and both the organizations put in that much more money. So that whetted his appetite. Then he started doing an annual ride in various U.S. cities, but committed himself to doing the toughest bike race in the world. It's the Race Across America. And that too commenced in California, and it went coast to coast. It started in California, and it ended in Annapolis, Maryland. You had to finish it, and it was it could be an individual or it could be a relay. FARA assembled with Kyle Bryant's wonderful leadership. He assembled a 4-man team. He and one other rider had FA. The other 2 were, completely healthy, and that 4-man relay team had to have someone in the pedals at all times, and they had to finish in Annapolis under 9 days.
Wow, that's great. And what was the year? What was the date of that?
Oh my gosh, I knew you'd ask, and it seems like day before yesterday.
But it's an annual event, so there'll be another one.
There'll be another one.
When is the next one?
Well, it's I have no idea, but we won't have an entry. That was the one time that there was an FARA entry, and they finished in like 8 days and 9 hours, and they won their category in the competition, and that was a powerful. There's now a film about that experience.
Right. I remember. Yeah.
And now Kyle has just published a book. Shifting into High Gear is the name of the book.
Great.
And the Ataxian is the name of the movie. So, yeah.
I think that does it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you so much.
Okay.